The women in the assisted living facility were gathered in the common room, sharing stories of the loves that had defined their lives. The kind of stories you only tell when you know the ending. When it was my turn, I spoke without inflection. When I was 25, my husband gave me his heart. The room went instantly silent. No one needed the details. The quiet that followed was profound, the kind that settles after a shared tragedy. Even after 40 years, the thought of him still brought that familiar, sharp ache to my chest. I pushed myself up, ready to retreat to my room, when a new resident, a woman who had only arrived a few weeks ago, spoke up. Funny thing is, the year I'll never forget is the first year I was with my husband. I told him I wanted a real life, a real title. She paused, taking a slow sip of her lukewarm tea. He heard me, and the next day, his wife conveniently suffered a sudden cardiac episode. He faked giving her his heart and staged his own death. His wife mourned him for 40 years, believing he was her sacrifice. Meanwhile, we lived out our lives, and surrounded by children and grandchildren. Her eyes were fixed on me as she spoke, and the malice in them was a dark, bottomless well. In that moment, I recognized her. Sienna Lowe, Reese's secretary from 4 decades ago. The shock was a physical blow. I passed out. When I opened my eyes again, the first thing I saw was Reese. He was dressed in a cheap Santa suit, holding out a small festive gift. "Liza, Merry Christmas. Go on, open it. Tell me you love it." The scene was terrifyingly familiar. In my past life, the object inside that cheerfully wrapped box had induced a cardiac episode. When I woke up in the hospital, I received the news of his death, his sacrifice. Now I looked at his face, vibrant and near, the face I had mourned for 40 years. But beneath the relief of seeing him alive, Sienna's words echoed, induced cardiac episode, staged his own death. My hand hovered midair. Finally, under the expectant gaze of the man I loved, my fingers landed on the ribbon. I slowly unveiled the box. The contents, an object identical to the one in my memory, sat silently on the velvet lining. In the same instant, the familiar crippling pain seized my heart. My vision tunneled, and Reese's panicked face began to swim before me. I woke up to the smell of disinfectant and the sound of quiet sobbing. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Fenton, held my hand, her voice thick with tears. "Eliza, you have to hold on. Reese, he left his heart for you. He wants you to live a full life." Everything was exactly as it had been in the last life. Except this time, I didn't cry. My face was unnervingly blank. The circle of friends and family around my bed watched my dry-eyed silence. Their sympathy curdled into confusion, then into a silent, communal accusation. "How could you not weep? How could you be so calm? He gave his life for you." Ignoring their protests, I ripped off the monitors and rushed home. I tore through the house in a frantic search. Drawers, closets, old journals, junk boxes. Finally, hidden deep in the files on his old desktop computer, I found a purchase history. Following the record was an unfamiliar delivery address. I drove there immediately. It was a quiet suburban neighborhood, the house warm and comfortable. I didn't see anyone, but a neighbor emerged to take out the trash, giving me a friendly, assessing look. "You looking for the couple in 302? They're the sweetest thing." The neighbor chatted easily, tossing her bag into the bin. I remember once it was pouring rain, and he worried his wife would slip. He actually took 2 hours off work, just to lay non-slip mats from the garage door to the front path. And he never comes home from the grocery store without a little bunch of daisies. Her favorites. I listened in silence, every word falling like a drop of ice. Non-slip mats in the rain. Her favorite flowers. Reese had done those things for me too. After my diagnosis, during that rainy season, he had silently lined our walkway. He had always remembered to bring home a bouquet of my favorite, white lilies. The details I had cherished as symbols of a unique, irreplaceable love were nothing more than a well-used script. They were not for me, but for the role of wife. With a weak heart, I sat back in my car and closed the door. The world was suddenly and terribly quiet. The steering wheel was cold in my hands. Where was I supposed to go? What was I supposed to believe? On what foundation had 40 years of mourning and heart-wrenching loss been built? How much was sincere love, and how much was a performance? My phone screen flickered to life. A notification. It was a new post from a profile I'd added years ago. Someone I didn't know but hadn't bothered to delete. Picture was a casual street view tagged in a distant coastal town. The caption was simple. "New places set up. She loves the ocean." A profound chill ran through me. That coastal town was the exact place Reese and Sienna had moved to. In the previous life, this profile had also been on my friends list. He rarely posted, but when he did, it was always a glimpse into a peaceful, Ordinary married life. Grocery runs. Watching old movies on a rainy day. Tending to the flower pots on the balcony. The words were full of the quiet smoke and warmth of a simple, treasured life. I had no idea who he was, but I'd always thought, if my Reese were still here, he would be like this. Never deleted the stranger's account. Sometimes, I'd even give a silent like, hoping to borrow a sliver of that illusory warmth, to soothe my own endless desolation. I hadn't known that was him. Reese Fenton. He was living a life I had desperately wanted, and loving another woman with the authenticity I craved. Next thing I knew, I was on a flight to that distant coastal town. 40 years of agony demanded an answer. Following the information I'd gathered, I found the coffee shop owned by one of Sienna's friends. Hearing I was an old acquaintance, the friend greeted me warmly. Before I even had to ask, she began talking about how Reese and Sienna met. Reese and Sienna were college sweethearts, practically. Well, he was 2 years ahead, but they met at orientation, and they've been in touch ever since. It wasn't until last year they decided to finally make it official. Sienna loves the coast, so Reese bought this beautiful ocean front house. Said he wanted to spend the rest of his life here with her. And they barely moved in when Sienna got pregnant. Reese was ecstatic. Said this was true peace, and they had to hurry up and make it all legitimate. For her and the baby. I learned they had known each other for so long. They had planned to grow old here all along. Sienna was already pregnant. The friend kept talking about the details of their courtship, but my mind had slipped back to my past life. Reese and I had almost had a child too, but because of my heart condition, the doctor strongly advised against it. Reese had been silent for a long time. Then he'd held me and said, "We won't keep it. I only need you to be safe." I deeply moved and profoundly guilty. So guilty. I'd considered gambling with my life to carry the baby to term. But then I overheard a phone call between him and his mother. Yes, I messed with the timing. So what? She's pregnant. Now I just have to coax her and she'll be too soft-hearted to end it. What's wrong with wanting a child? In that moment, the world fell silent. I only heard the heavy, sickening thump of my own heart. And her husband before my eyes. Warped into a stranger I didn't know at all. I smashed everything within reach and screamed at him. I called him selfish, a liar. A man who didn't care about me, only saw me as a means to an end. After his initial panic, his face twisted into the rage of a cheat. Exposed, he spat the words out. "A woman on borrowed time like you. If you can't even give me an heir, what was the point of this marriage?" All my fury froze. I looked at him as if he were a monster. Then a sudden, violent spasm gripped my abdomen. A warm gush of liquid soaked my skirt and the chaotic, broken floor. I lost the baby. In the hospital room, his parents arrived. In front of them, Reese dropped to his knees, slapping his own face. Again and again. He sobbed that he had been momentarily insane, that he desperately wanted our child, that he was terrified of losing me, and it had made him lose his mind. He was wrong. He knew it. And he begged me to forgive him, promising he would only focus on my health from now on. He hit himself hard, and his cheek quickly swelled. His parents tried to restrain him, their eyes red, worried about upsetting me further. I kept my eyes closed, unwilling to witness the nauseating, absurd performance. My body was in pain, but my mind was numb and frozen. But the human heart is a wretched thing. Even though I knew it was poison wrapped in frosting. Even after experiencing the deepest betrayal, seeing him kneeling there, face bruised and tear-streaked, that pathetic, treacherous emotion began to stir. A man wanting a child with the person he loves. Is that really so wrong? In that moment, I found an excuse for him. I softened. I forgave him. After that, he never mentioned children again. He became meticulous, attentive, and outwardly full of remorse. I had believed it was guilt. I had believed it was repentance. Now, sitting in this coffee-scented shop, listening to his mistress's friend casually mention Sienna's pregnant, I finally put the thises together. He hadn't given up the idea of a family. He had just traded me in for a newer, more functional model to build his perfectly complete home. Are you here to see them? The friend finally paused, looking curiously at my silent, pale face. I parted my lips. The saltiness of the sea air seemed to clog my throat. Was I here to see them? Under what identity? Before I could invent a plausible lie, the friend offered her own conclusion. "Oh, I know. You must be coming for their wedding. Tomorrow night at the Grand Meridian. What a joyous occasion. You can join the fun." The Grand Meridian? The very hotel Reese and I had chosen for our wedding. I was back at the Grand Meridian. The champagne rose archway, the long, sweeping red carpet. Every single detail, the curve of the petals, the hold of the satin ribbon. was exactly as recent. I had meticulously planned on the blueprints years ago. In my previous life, I never set foot here again, terrified of invoking the ghost of what should have been. Now this metaphorical graveyard of my suffering was hosting their happiness. Melted into the crowd of guests and saw many familiar faces. Reese's relatives, old colleagues, and even his parents. The two seniors were dressed in crisp, celebratory clothes, rounded by old friends, their faces beaming with unconcealed joy. I managed to smile looking at them, though it probably looked more like a grimace. In my last life, after Reese died, his mother had clung to my hand, saw until she was exhausted. Eliza, Reese is gone, but you are our daughter now. His final wish was for you to live well. We will take care of you for him. I took her words as truth and as a debt. When they were sick, I was the one who stayed up to nurse them, signing papers and running errands. I fixed the leaky pipes, replaced the light bulbs, and managed their seasonal wardrobe changes. I never missed a holiday gift, and my weekend visits were sacrosanct. I signed the high-risk consent forms for Mr. Fenton's heart surgery. When Mrs. Fenton became frail, I paid for her in home care and visited weekly. I saw them through to their final days, arranging everything properly. As their daughter, I believe this was penance, a memorial to my lost love. Now, I heard Mrs. Fenton boast to a relative, Sienna is a dream. She's taken such good care of Reese these past few years, and she's so attentive to us. We waited so long for them to finally settle down. Mr. Fenton nodded, his voice full of relief. It's true. If not for her, Reese would never have recovered. We've been anticipating this day for too long. It turned out that all those years, I spent living as their dedicated widow, caring for them until the end. They knew the whole time they knew. Their son was living an actual married life in another city, with another woman. All my heartfelt devotion was probably seen as the pathetic, self-absorbed theatrics of a fool. A sharp, searing bitterness rushed up my throat. I lowered my head. A hot tear splashed onto the carpet, spreading into a dark, small stain. Then a distant aunt leaned in, her voice low and tentative. Speak, King of Witch. Whatever happened to Reese's first wife? Eliza Snow? The cheerful chatter instantly died. Mrs. Fenton's smile faded. She quickly pulled her lips into a thin line. Oh, darling, today is a happy day. Let's not spoil it by bringing up irrelevant people and things. That's all in the past. We need to look forward. Irrelevant people? Yesterday, she sent me a message telling me to move on. Today, I was irrelevant. The ceremony was about to begin. Guests took their seats. I stood at the back, watching the scene that mirrored my long-ago dreams. The music I chose, the flowers I selected, every step of the professional I had designed. On the stage, Reese stood tall and straight in a crisp tux. This was the first time since my rebirth that I truly looked at him. He looked young, vivid and real, exactly as he was in my memory. That familiar, stubborn ache in my chest returned, dull but pervasive. The barrier between us was not just these few days since my rebirth. It was the 4 decades of solitude I had endured. The wedding march began. Sienna, in a white gown, started her walk toward Reese. I watched the answer I had relentlessly pursued, the very question of his love. It suddenly felt meaningless. He felt meaningless. Sienna, her smile radiant and certain, stopped before him. The officiant began the familiar inquiry. Reese Fenton, do you take Sienna Lowe to be your wife? To love her, comfort her, honor and keep her in sickness and in health, holding only to her until death do you part? All eyes were on him. I turned away. I was done watching a perfect picture that was never meant for me. I took my first step toward the exit. But from the stage Reese's voice cut through the air, clear and devastatingly loud. I do not. The silence that followed Reese's declaration was heavier than the one in the assisted living facility. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the Grand Meridian's ballroom. I do not. 3 words. They hung in the salt-laced air, vibrating with a frequency that shattered the carefully constructed tableau of the perfect couple. Sienna's radiant smile didn't fall immediately. It froze, twitching at the corners as if her face couldn't process the command to frown. Reese? She whispered, her voice amplified by the microphone, a joyous trill warping into confusion. The script, you're joking, right? For the video? But Reese wasn't looking at her. He wasn't looking at the officiant or his weeping, joyful parents in the front row. He was looking at me. Across the sea of heads, through the haze of expensive perfume and ocean breeze, his gaze locked onto mine at the back of the room. I saw the blood drain from his face, leaving him as pale as the death he had once staged for me. It wasn't love in his eyes. It was the sheer, primal terror of a man seeing a ghost, or worse, a creditor. I didn't hide. I didn't tremble. I simply stood there, my hand resting on the brass handle of the exit door, wearing the black dress I had bought for his funeral in the last life. Reese. Mrs. Fenton stood up, clutching her pearls. What is the meaning of this? Reese stepped back from Sienna as if she were contagious. He pulled at his collar, his eyes darting between me and the exit. He knew. In that split second, he calculated everything. I was supposed to be in the hospital, dying or dead from the shock of his gift. I was supposed to be the tragic backstory that funded this new life. My presence here meant the checks would stop. The house would be reclaimed. The fraud would be exposed. I can't, Reese stammered, his voice cracking. He shoved the microphone into the officiant's chest and scrambled off the stage, ignoring Sienna's outstretched hand. Reese, Sienna screamed, the sound tearing through the decorum.
I'm pregnant.
You can't walk away. The crowd erupted. Whispers turned into shouts. But I didn't stay to watch the circus. I had seen the clown unmasked. I didn't need to watch him slip on the peel. I pushed the heavy door open and stepped out into the cool evening air. The ocean roared in the distance, indifferent to the human wreckage inside. My heart, usually a fluttering, fragile bird, beat with a slow, heavy rhythm. Thump, thump. It was the sound of a war drum. I had made it 10 paces down the promenade before I heard the frantic slap of dress shoes on pavement. Eliza! Eliza, wait. I stopped but didn't turn. I let him run to me. I let him breathe hard, let the sweat of his panic soak into that crisp tuxedo I knew he had charged to our joint credit card. Reese skidded to a halt in front of me, grabbing my shoulders. His face was a mask of frantic improvisation. Eliza, oh my God, you're here. I can explain. It's not what you think. I was undercover. It's a business sting. I had to. I looked at his hands on my shoulders. The hands I had held while he wept fake tears over a lost baby. The hands that had placed a box of death in my lap. Remove your hands, I said. My voice was quiet, lacking any inflection. Reese flinched as if burned.
He dropped his hands.
Eliza, listen to me. I saw you, and I realized I couldn't do it. I couldn't go through with it. I love you. This. He gestured vaguely back toward the hotel where Sienna was likely destroying the cake. This was a mistake. A moment of madness. You know how much pressure I've been under with the company. The company I built, I corrected. We built, he pleaded, dropping to his knees, a move he had perfected. The same move he used when I caught him on the phone with his mother about the abortion. Eliza, look at me. I'm a mess without you. I was lost. But seeing you there, it woke me up.
Please.
My heart is yours. It always has been. I looked down at him. In my past life, this was the moment I would have crumbled. I would have seen his pain and assumed it was a reflection of my own. I would have offered grace. But I wasn't looking at my husband anymore. I was looking at a parasite. Reese, I said, a small, cold smile touching my lips. You didn't stop the wedding because you love me. You stopped it because you realized that if you said I do while I was standing there, I would have you arrested for bigamy before the reception started. His jaw went slack. The glint of calculation returned to his eyes. Eliza, don't be like that. We can fix this. Think of my parents. They're old. They were just confused. Your parents, I cut in, who are currently inside telling everyone how Sienna saved you? The parents I nursed for 40 years in another life? They aren't confused, Reese. They are accomplices. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen and held it up. It was a recording of the conversation I had overheard in the lobby just moments before the ceremony, his mother bragging about the house title being transferred to Sienna's name tomorrow. I've already called the bank, I said softly. The joint accounts are frozen. The credit cards are canceled. And this house? The one you bought with the equity line for my apartment? My lawyer is filing a lien on it as we speak. Reese stood up slowly. The sobbing boy vanished. The man who looked at me now was the one I had seen in my nightmares, cold, entitled, and cruel. You can't do that, he sneered. You're sick. You have a weak heart. You can't handle a legal battle. You'll die, Eliza. The doctor said any stress could kill you. Do you really want your last days to be spent in court? You're right, I said. I am on borrowed time. I stepped closer to him until I could smell the champagne on his breath. But I'm not going to spend it dying for you. I'm going to spend it burying you. The following week was a masterclass in scorched earth. I didn't return to the home we shared. I checked into a hotel, the kind with room service and high thread counts, and set up a command center. My first visitor was not Reese, but his mother. Mrs. Fenton arrived in the lobby, her face a blotchy map of indignation. She spotted me drinking herbal tea and marched over, slamming her handbag onto the table. How could you? She hissed, keeping her voice low to avoid the concierge's attention. Humiliating him like that. Sienna is in the hospital, Eliza. The stress sent her into early labor. I hope the baby is healthy, I said, buttering a scone. It's an innocent party. You heartless. She sputtered. Reese is devastated. He's staying in a motel. He has nothing. He has his health, I said, taking a bite. And he has you.
And he has Sienna.
That's all he wanted, wasn't it? A real family? I'm just giving him the opportunity to support them on his own merit. He gave up everything for you, she cried, playing her greatest hit. He stayed with you despite your condition. He sacrificed his chance at a legacy. I set the knife down. The clatter against the china was sharp. He didn't sacrifice anything, Martha. He gambled. I leaned forward. I know about the insurance policy. The one taken out on me 3 months ago. The one with a double indemnity clause for accidental death. Martha Fenton went still. I canceled it this morning. I continued. And I've instructed my lawyer to audit the care funds I've been providing for you and Frank. It turns out, siphoning money for your son's mistress is considered fraud. Her mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. You wouldn't. I would. And I have. Now, please leave. My heart rate is elevating, and my doctor says I need to remove toxic elements from my life. She fled. I watched her go, waiting for the guilt to hit me. I waited for that familiar ache of being the bad daughter-in-law. It never came. Instead, the tea tasted exceptionally sweet. The legal battle that Reese threatened didn't materialize. Men like Reese rely on the silence of their victims. They rely on the script where the woman cries and asks why. When the woman simply hands over a spreadsheet of embezzled funds and a divorce decree, they fold. He tried to contact me, of course. Long, rambling emails shifting from begging to threatening. Voicemails where he sounded drunk, weeping about how Sienna didn't understand him like I did, how her laugh was annoying, how he missed the quiet dignity of our life. I didn't listen to them. I forwarded them to his lawyer and to Sienna. Yes, I sent them to her. Not out of malice, but out of a strange, cold courtesy. If she was going to be the next Mrs. Fenton, she deserved to know exactly who she had won. 3 months later, the collapse happened. It wasn't stress. It was simply biology. My heart, structurally flawed and tired, decided it had beaten enough. I was in my lawyer's office, signing the final papers that would transfer the deed of the beach house back to my name, when the world tilted sideways. The tunneling vision was familiar. The crushing weight on my chest was an old friend. This is it, I thought as I hit the carpet. I changed the ending, but the runtime is the same. I woke up in the ICU. The beep of the monitor was the only sound. She's awake. I turned my head. It wasn't Reese. It wasn't his mother. It was a man I recognized from a Facebook profile. The stranger whose photos of the ocean I had liked in my darkest moments. The man I had hallucinated was Reese in another life. He was wearing scrubs. He was a doctor. My doctor. Dr. Eris? I croaked. He smiled, and his eyes crinkled in the corners, the exact way they did in his profile picture. Welcome back, Eliza. You gave us quite a scare. Did I die? For about 2 minutes, yes, he said, checking my chart. But we're stubborn here. We brought you back. He hesitated, then pulled a chair closer. Eliza, I know your history. I know you've been told your condition is inoperable. That was true 5 years ago. But techniques have advanced. I've been reviewing your case since you were admitted. You're a candidate for a new valve procedure. I stared at him. Why? Why what? Why help me? I'm alone. I have no one waiting for me. Dr. Eris looked at me, his expression serious. I've seen you in here before, visiting your in-laws years ago. I saw how you cared for them. I saw a woman with a tremendous capacity for love who was receiving none in return. When you came in today, let's just say, I want to see what you do with a heart that actually works. Tears, hot and real, finally pricked my eyes. Not for Reese. Not for the baby I lost. But for the possibility of a future I hadn't dared to script. Do it, I whispered. The recovery was brutal. But every step I took was mine. I wasn't walking toward a husband. I was walking toward myself. 6 months post-surgery, I returned to the coastal town. Not to the house Reese had bought for Sienna. I had sold that. I bought a small cottage further up the cliffs, overlooking the wild, crashing waves. I was sitting on my porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunset, when a beat-up sedan pulled into my driveway. Reese got out. He looked 10 years older. His suit was ill-fitting, his hair thinning. He held a bouquet of daisies, grocery store daisies, wilting in the heat. I didn't stand up. I didn't feel fear. I felt bored. Eliza, he called out, walking up the path. He tried to smile, but it was a grimace of desperation. I heard you were back. I heard you're better. I am, I said. That's wonderful. A miracle. He stopped at the foot of the stairs. Sienna left me. Taken the kid. She's suing for support I don't have. My parents, Dad had a stroke. Mom can't handle him alone. He looked at me with those puppy dog eyes, the weapon that had kept me enslaved for a lifetime. We miss you, Eliza. I miss you. I know I messed up, but we have history. You're the only one who knows how to take care of us. You're the only one with a heart big enough to forgive. He held out the daisies. Come home, Eliza. Let me take care of you. Let us take care of you. I looked at the daisies. I looked at him. In my mind, I saw the timeline where I said yes. I saw myself nursing his bitterness, funding his failures, dying quietly in a back room while he found a new Sienna. Reese, I said. Yes, honey? Hope flared in his eyes. You're trespassing. The hope died. What? I said. Get off my property. Eliza, be reasonable. I have nowhere to go. I'm your husband. My ex-husband. I corrected. The papers were finalized yesterday. You didn't contest them because you couldn't afford a lawyer. I stood up. My chest felt strong. My pulse was steady. And Reese? What? He snapped, his face twisting into that familiar ugliness. Stop buying daisies. I hate daisies. My favorite flower is the camellia. You never knew that. You never asked. I turned around and walked into my house, closing the door firmly behind me. I heard him shouting, cursing, throwing the flowers against the wood. I locked the deadbolt. I walked through the house to the kitchen, where a vase of fresh, white camellias sat on the counter. Beside them was a note in messy Dr. Scrawl. Thought these might brighten the room. Dinner at 7? Eris. I picked up the card and smiled. It wasn't a desperate, clawing need. It wasn't a tragedy. It was just an invitation. I walked to the window and watched Reese's car retreat down the driveway, disappearing into the dust. He was a story I had finished telling. A book I had finally closed. I touched the scar on my chest. Beneath it, a strong, rhythmic beat echoed in the quiet room. Thump, thump. It was the sound of a beginning.